So, I'm filling in for Andrea Sullivan, who's a partner of mine at Interbrand. I recently moved there, so I've literally been in the country a week, I think. So I'm getting over jet lag from New York, and now I'm in Las Vegas. I wake up at 1 o'clock in the morning. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm doing. This is easily the biggest conference I've ever talked at, so, and it's terrifying. I'm on last, you know. I don't know what else can happen. Thunderbolts, you know, I have to follow Bowie. I've got no sex toys in my presentation, you know. So if you see any pictures, just clap anyway. And I was given this title as well. So, right, easy start. So I thought I'd start at the beginning. So as I mentioned, this is my first talk at AIGA. I can't even say it. I keep going A, because I'm used to AIGA in Australia. I'm used to D&AD in the UK. So even AIGA, I have to look at it and really stare at it to make sure I say it right. It's my first talk in Las Vegas. It's my first talk in the USA, because it actually is my first day at work today. Yeah, I know. Terrifying. Right, so I thought, right, I got this kind of half-cooked deck from somebody else Sunday evening, and I thought, right, how can I start this and make it easy? So I thought I'll start by just talking about me, which is the easiest way. And actually, it's interesting that Andrea said, Lena said, keep on moving, because I thought I'd start by telling you all the different places I've been. So I actually started my career I can step away from the desk at this point, because I actually know this story. So I started my design career, I guess, in Manchester in roughly 2000. I was lucky that my external examiner at my university was my first boss. And he's been one of my biggest mentors throughout my whole career. He's been absolutely incredible. And this is a side story, but he runs a company called The Chase, which is this very small boutique design agency in the UK, based in, you know how you normally get on a shopping bag, you get like London, Milan, Rome, or something like that. His is London, Manchester, and a place called Preston, which is in the middle of nowhere in the north, which I really respect because he really loves where he comes from. So he set up this company to really kind of take the interest away from all of the big design agencies in London. So he started in Manchester, and he had this idea to create this agency all about really stripping away everything that's not needed. So he has this philosophy that they still use today. It's 27 or 28 years later. And he talks about, there's an elephant story. There's an old Indian wood carver, and he's got this huge block at the side of the road, and he carves these amazing elephants out of this block of wood. And somebody says, how do you do it? And he says, I just cut away the bits of wood that don't look like an elephant. And that kind of theory, although it's slightly abstract, really kind of has affected the way I work all the way through my career, and I hope you can see that in some of the work I show you shortly. I break it down into 3 rough sections. So I'm going to talk about graphics, branding, and then growth as well. So we get the kind of the growth mechanisms in there. So firstly, I thought I'd start with some of my old work. So this kind of, again, was at the start of my career. This example here is it's called Leaf Street. So it's an environmental housing project for a development in Manchester. And I think, for me, what I always try and do with all of my work is, and I completely agree with all these people who have been talking as well this morning, is that design is an extremely personal thing. It's something that you put on the paper, and it kind of represents you as much as your client. But at the same time, I really believe in stepping back and letting the project almost develop itself. So wherever I can, I try and step back and not put myself in the projects, if that makes sense. So this is a good example of a really reductive mark. And all it was ever a logo. This was way before we have these kind of larger corporate brands. This is another one called Lay Easy Beds, with a funny spelling. Again, it was a really simple identity. Just by turning an L on the side, it turned it into this bed that then they could start to use as a very functional tool. So as well as photography, they also started doing kind of mattress qualities on it as well. It's not sexy sex toys, is it? Right. No. Apparently. So another one. So this is for a really bespoke printer in the UK in London. called Gavin Martin. So they've got this amazing facility where they have this huge library of all of the best printed design in the world. It's absolutely incredible. And you can go there to get inspiration. So he asked me to create a mailer for him. So we did this really simple idea of a poster, using a lot of the print samples that were in the library and just turning the spine sideways so we could create this question mark. And the copy at the bottom says, are you looking for inspiration? This again, so do you know about D&AD? Does everyone know about D&AD? Okay, so D&AD, you win like yellow pencils. It's like winning an Oscar in the UK. So this was their version, I guess, of this conference, really. So this is uncovering new talent. So this is getting all of the new students who launch every year through a topic called New Blood. So we actually got real students and put them under these yellow sheets to represent D&AD. And then even at the event, we'd have the whole identity was completely integrated. So we'd have things like, that was the signage, that guy there. We'd have people actually holding the sign. So when you went there, there'd be these students undercover still. Yeah, I've got a thing for people as well. The next one's a people one as well. So this is, again, this is another way. This is called D&AD Graduate Academy with HP. So this was a strange thing. So what they were trying to do with the Graduate Academy was formalize workplace like interns. So they'd get the best 50 design students and they'd get the best 50 creative agencies and they'd try and do this kind of like dating service. So again, we did the campaign for it. And this was all about getting a look into the industry. So we had all these real students pushing their noses up against all this glass all over the place. It was great. It worked really well on the website as well. So we had this guy like trying to look, you know, as you went onto the website, he was trying to look back at you. So as you see, I had loads of great time. I had loads of fun. And we were lucky. We won loads of awards at the same time. I'm trying to tell two stories at once really here. So this is, I'll just finish on the work and I'll tell you kind of why I'm showing you this work. So this is another one, the intellectual property. So this is a brick that you push down on those little arrows that you might be able to see there. And the whole box opens up to lots of little tiles of kind of examples of projects that we've done in the property market in the UK. And then the last, oh no, there's two more. So this one is a karaoke invite. So Poppadom Preach, there was loads of these. There was a Korma Police, Cry on My Pilau. There was about 12 of them in the end. So this was an invite for Korean karaoke. And then last, this was for the BBC Wildlife Fund. So this was a really beautiful calendar that we produced called Almost Extinct. So this was, we got 365 of the most critically endangered animals and put them one each day that you'd have to cross out with a red pen when you got it. So this was trying to raise awareness of how quickly all the animals around the world are becoming extinct and to raise funds for them. It did really well. I mean, you can see the level of detail I've gone into. Even the binding is one of the crosses as well. So that's kind of the work I used to do, and I really loved it. I really had so much fun. It was really interesting. But at the same time, there was something missing. And the thing that was missing was that it all felt just throwaway. I mean, I know kind of what we produce in a way is, but I'd like to think that design can do so much more than just interest people for a few seconds. So about 5 years ago, I got the opportunity to go to Interbrand in Melbourne. So they asked me to go and run the office over there. So I jumped at the chance. And then a few years later, I moved to Sydney as well. It was my real introduction to branding and business transformation. And I think this is where I kind of get much more excitement nowadays. I still like doing those kind of little one-off ideas. I still have a few at the moment I'm kind of working on. Like you're saying as well, always produce your own art. You do the stuff you're doing for work, but then there should also be some other things that just naturally happen as you come up with ideas. So going into branding, and that's kind of when I really started branding was only about 5 years ago. I mean, I was kind of doing branding before, but really playing with the edges of it. So when I went into branding, it was a massive shift, and it encouraged me to think deeper about design and how it could influence organizations in a really profound way. How we could use design to influence not only how things looked, but how the organization acted, and how it changed its internal behaviors and its external customer experience. That was the really exciting bit for me. So not just focusing on individual kind of moments, and focusing on actually how you can change the behavior of an organization. I think that's something really interesting that not a lot of people get to do. So now, I was using design to directly influence the DNA of an organization and help shape their experiences. Now, I'm going to show you one short project that I was fortunate to work on in Australia as an actionable strategy, adaptive design language, and experience examples as well. So it's for the Sydney Opera House. I don't think I'll ever get another great job like it. It's just such a gift and such a privilege to work on a building like that. So they approached Interbrand about 2-ish years ago now, or maybe 3. And they had a problem. You wouldn't think it, but this really is the biggest venue for hire in the world. Everything that's put on there is put on by different vendors that come there, pay them money, and they can put on their own productions. The challenge with that is Sydney Opera House don't really control their own experience a lot of the time. So what happens is there is a really disparate experience, and people don't understand what the Opera House is for, who should be going, what they should be going to see. And I guess generally the experience is falling between the gaps. So they had 5 resident companies, things like, so you obviously know about opera, but they also have dance, ballet, theatre, and an orchestra, I think. And then loads of kind of food and drinks vendors as well. So it was a real complicated mix. If you walked around there, you wouldn't be sure who's controlling that experience. So on top of that, we needed to unite the organization and unify the experience. So we did start with the building. What I was going to say is that we went through a kind of a real iterative period where we did sprints, 1-week sprints for about 3 or 4 weeks, each focusing on a completely different area of Australia, on the architecture, which actually was the first week, on the inspiration of what the building was trying to do. Every week was different. And at the end of every week, we'd get the client in and we'd sit down and we'd just show them a whole room full of design. And it wasn't a presentation, and it wasn't about picking a solution. It was just talking through a creative process. It was a really beautiful way of working, and it really got them on board. Going back to this, we looked at the history of the building and the purpose of the original building. So the original building, I think, there was the Australian Premier in 1954. There was a guy called Joseph Cahill, and he basically said, Australia cannot go on without a venue to enlighten the people of Australia. He just thought culture wasn't embedding in Australia as they knew it. So the building was developed by this amazing Danish architect called Jørn Utzon, and he created this incredible shell-like building. The building was conceived to lift Australia's cultural enlightenment, and working with the CEO, a purpose was developed to be the source of inspiration. Now, I really do believe purposes, great, strong purposes, do sit at the heart of the experiences that create brands. The challenge is that you need to make sure that they are actionable. So I guess my issue with this is, although that is exactly what the building was meant to be produced for, and that's exactly what it's meant to do today, it doesn't actually tell you how to do things. It doesn't tell you how to create a communication. It doesn't tell you how to start imagining content. So the breakthrough for us came when we articulated it into an experience principle, which we called shifting perspectives. And as soon as you start talking about shifting perspectives, you start talking about what the building really is trying to do. It's really trying to change the way you think about culture and art. So the way it puts on an opera has to change, the way it puts on theatre or ballet or anything else. The idea of shifting perspectives can work with anything. It can work with content. So, for instance, at the time, do you know Peppa Pig? So Peppa Pig is this kind of phenomenon, especially in the UK and in Australia. And it's a small animated female pig. And we did loads of work on Peppa Pig, which is really bizarre. I actually haven't got any in the presentation, unfortunately, because I've had to edit it down. But we had to look at how we could tell the Peppa Pig story in lots of different ways for lots of different people. So the idea of shifting perspectives really works with any kind of content. You put Peppa Pig in the middle, and then you go, right, for these kind of people, it's about... there was a whole thing about how she was a real feminist icon, for instance. So there's a whole kind of element about being feminism. There was one of the local politicians said, oh, the last time I saw that it was number 42 on a Chinese takeaway. So there was loads of different opinions going on around Peppa Pig. So it was really interesting. And then this is how we created it in terms of the visual look and feel, which you're about to see. I think this is meant to have music on. Oh yeah, can you turn it up a little bit? That's actually the building. That's the architecture of the building and how it's created. So all that is a motion test. That isn't anything. You don't really need to clap every time I show you something, but thank you. So all of that is a motion test to show how we can start shifting between content. So that isn't the final product even. That is something that we would have done in-house very quickly to get a sense of how this sculptural identity can start moving between content and start shifting between content. There was one other bit, another key part of the identity was this. So we talked a lot about sculptural form language. If you look at the building is so unique, we had to find a way of representing it. And as I mentioned before, a lot of the actual communications, the Opera House don't produce themselves, so they get given imagery by whatever show or performance is on. So we have to find ways of influencing that communication without taking over. And obviously one of them is using the language as well. So by using the type, and owning the type, we can start to own that experience as well. So this was the final typeface that was developed. It's called Utzon after the architect. And I think the really clever bit is all the technology you don't see behind this. So the thing I was just showing you before, this is actually how the typeface is built. So it was built in an architectural program called Rhino. This was done for a few reasons. One is that it's a nice story. You know, it's an architectural building, it's an architectural brand. But beyond that, it has a really commercial use, it has a really clever commercial use. So if you think about when you're going to a retail store, all the opportunities you have to start building this as a physical object into simple things like key rings or mugs or bottles of wine or anything like that. So this becomes really functional. So as well as building it in our Rhino, we also had to find a way of swapping it out. So you could use it in design programs. So we developed scripts with developers so you could automatically type a normal typeface. So this is based on circular. And then you could hit a button and it would automatically swap it out for this artwork. So this is 7 vector layers, I think, in total. So we had to work out all these problems as we went on. So I think the challenge is when you get talked to about projects, everything's very linear. Everything makes sense in order. That's not the reality of how projects work. Projects are generally a kind of a fog, and you start pulling solutions together and start solving problems as you go. This just shows you some of the communications. This is this was going to be an A to Z of culture that we could put around Sydney to show all the different things the Opera House did. So it uses the sails and it uses the typeface Utzon. Really breaking down those barriers of what people think the Opera House is for. And then we also, online, we did customer experience maps, were developed, and digital toolkits were designed to show a connected experience. We even looked at doing free tours as well, which you'll see in a second, all about different perspectives. So if you went on these free concourse tours, you would get Julian Assange doing the political view of it, or you'd get Kate Blanchett doing the art tour. All famous Australians as well. So it's really about raising Australian culture in its totality. Offline, in a strange way, this is where I get most excited, which sounds ridiculous, but we continue the sculptural DNA through the products, uniforms, that all could be purchased at the retail store, like I mentioned earlier. So the great thing here is we're filling in those gaps. We don't own the meal itself, because that's provided by somebody else, but we can start to look to influence every other little bit of that experience along the way. So even the person that comes to serve you and the cutlery they put down. We even outlined really influential product designers and fashion designers. So I don't know if any of you know, there's a guy called Dion Lee who's already done a kind of a sculptural range based on the Opera House. So I've already tried to connect him with the Opera House as well to do all the uniforms there as well. So it could be absolutely incredible. It's really only just starting what they're going to be doing with it. So a cohesive experience that can work anywhere, and also inform the content through the principle of shifting perspectives. So that's as much as I can show you at the moment. So this is how we think about it, really. So if you can get the culture right, if you can get a clear purpose of the organization that aligns with the capability, and deliver an experience that exceeds customer expectations, we can build a cohesive brand both on and offline. And if you get all this right, you can expect growth. Because we know a great brand emerges from clear strategy and exceptional experiences. Growth is an outcome of those strategy and exceptional experiences as well. So this is the corporate bit, unfortunately. So this is from Best Global Brands that just came out. This proves design works for businesses. All of the top 10 businesses there use design in their benefit. And they continue to use design as a lever in their organization. If we look at the combined, which is the green line, you can clearly see the direct correlation between the Best Global Brands Index and the financial performance of the S&P. So this thing's proved, you could see it earlier with the Lippincott talk earlier, everything we do adds to the bottom line. And I don't necessarily think that's a dirty word. I actually like the fact that what I am doing makes a difference. Now, whether that's financially or whether it's drawing people in for different reasons, I think all of them are really warranted. Of the top 10 growing brands this year, it's clear that design is at the heart of the business. They all use responsive operating models designed to reduce hierarchy, increase transparency, and encourage individual autonomy and experimentation. This commitment to new ways of working paves the way for better products, exceptional experiences, and ones that are truly human-centered. So I'm just going to quickly go over a few of these examples of how we can start to create paths for exceptional experiences and how we need to start thinking about branding and design, because it's changing all the time. We've had this through every single talk today. Everyone's terrified, but actually everyone should be excited. Like, there's no time like this at the moment where everything's shifting so much. So we're just going to start with some of the trends that are happening. So shaping behaviors. Technology continues to reshape the way we consume. For the first time, teenagers spend more time on YouTube than they ever have on cable. This has only just happened, and it's going to continue to grow. You've also got things like cable cutting, which is also sped up by things like online demand services like Netflix and Hulu. So that whole industry is going to change in the next 5 years. It's going to be dramatic, and it's going to happen quickly. I think that's why it's interesting for big businesses. No one can rest on the laurels anymore because the next change is around the corner. I was even on the plane on the way over here, and they were talking about a company called Juno. So Juno essentially is the next company that might undercut Uber. So they essentially run exactly the same business model as Uber, but the only thing that they design differently is that they pay the drivers more, and they get the better drivers. So that's a whole new business just opening up by someone having an idea about changing the business model. The next one is tolerance, still in shaping behaviors. So tolerance to poor experiences decreasing, new behaviors increasing, learning and discovery is now part of the process. So bots are already or being introduced to manage simple day-to-day tasks and reducing the need for specific apps. So if you don't know about bots, you do need to know how to start working them into the businesses that you're creating in the future, because they're going to be dramatic. And it's going to absolutely kill the need for a lot of the apps that you use as well on a daily basis. Alternatively, voice-activated AI is already integrated into more services, profoundly changing how we experience organizations in the future. All of these kind of technologies we need to start thinking about. It doesn't mean we're going to do them all straight away, but as you can see from the roadmap we've set out for the Sydney Opera House, we need to start pulling all these things together and start working out how we can best represent the companies we work for. And then this is really good. I don't know if you've seen this. So this is a company called Foodini, which is a brilliant name. I wish I thought of it. So Foodini are essentially 3D printed food. So they're already creating things like ravioli. I mean, to be honest, this is the best picture. If you look at some of their other images, it's really rudimentary. You wouldn't want to eat it at the moment. But you know it's going to change. Like, there's only a matter of time before all of this thing starts to come into our lives in a much more profound way. And just think of all the opportunities for big businesses. As soon as you've got one of those in people's houses, it's going to be incredible. This is another one. I think this is a really nice idea because this is almost, this example here of Burberry, this is innovating on purpose. What Burberry do is really understand the fashion world and how technology can start to integrate with it. So Christopher Bailey, who's their CEO and CFO, I think, or Chief Creative Officer. So he talks about searching for a moment, because he says, fashion, when you think about fashion, it's really passing. Trends come and go really quickly. And traditionally, fashion companies would launch a catwalk show, and you'd have to wait 6 months to get those clothes. So recently, he just went, right, we're not doing that anymore. We're going to change the whole mechanism of the way the whole business works. So the moment that catwalk happens, it's also online, and you can also buy it in store. Now, since then, this happened maybe 1 or 2 years ago, and since then, everyone's following suit. So Tom Ford's already doing it, and Topshop in the UK are already doing it. So that's an example of how design can start changing the business for the better. So they've stolen a march. Also innovating on purpose. I don't know if you've seen this yet. So this is Facebook's Workplace. So this is Facebook are rapidly expanding their user base. So they're doing this in loads of different ways. They're using way more languages than they ever used to, so they can reach more people around the world. They're putting planes into the sky, so they get more internet connections. And then they're also using the platform that already exists, and they've changed it so it works for enterprise. So rather than you just going into work and then nipping on Facebook to check your social life, you actually start using it soon for the way you work internally. So you're taking a core capability and adapting it in new categories. I think that's something that we can all start to think about in the way that we can approach these businesses. Again, iterating always, a state of perpetual beta is the new normal. A design mindset is what makes an iterative approach both viable and a source of growth. So one example here is Amazon Music, and the other example is Google Music. So the great thing about what these guys are doing is they're moving into new categories, not really to take them over completely, but really to enhance their existing product portfolio. So if you think about getting a connected ecosystem, this is the best way of going about it. All the best brands are both iterating and innovating simultaneously, improving the design for new areas of growth. And then humanizing the machine. I think this is something I'm really kind of keen to push in the work that I produce. I've even created identity. So this Apple Digital Touch, this is in its kind of infancy, really, on watches, and then it's also been brought into the new iOS in messaging. I've already created a brand in the UK that uses that digital touch so that people can almost send the logo that's created to other people. It's not out yet, so I can't really show you, unfortunately. But I think this is only going to continue to happen. You're going to get more and more of this, because I think we've all been through that kind of very minimal analog stage, and I think more experiences are going to become richer and richer as it goes on. This is another great example as well. So this is Google Soli. I think it's Soli. And it's technology, it's a tool that's helping companies innovate and build deeper relationships with their customers. So can you imagine in the future really just losing the screen completely? And the best example of that, which was touched on earlier, is this. So it's amazing, isn't it? It's absolutely amazing. I think that is probably the biggest leap since the mobile phone. I think that is going to absolutely change everything in the way we do it. So that's Magic Leap, which is an incredible company that at the moment they do have the technology working, but they need to kind of reduce it all so it works on a daily basis for people. But it will happen. I believe they'll make it work. So in the not too distant future, companies like Magic Leap will eliminate the technology barrier completely, creating experiences that blur the boundaries of reality. This will revolutionize the way we experience organizations. And I think things like this are absolutely incredible, just in terms of the potential of what we can do with it. But for now, technology brands are leading the way to deeply integrated and connected experiences across the products or services. In these cases, design ideology is applied to iterating and improving the strength of underlying platform that binds the ecosystem. So we're already seeing in these in our homes at the moment, things like Home and Echo. And they're only going to continue. All these products orbit around, connected seamlessly to a single user ID and familiar experience patterns across the third-party products and services will also be effortless, keeping users perpetually within the ecosystem. So everything's about ease of use and connectability. I think the interesting thing with this, especially with Home, is this. So making any expanding ecosystem exist on or offline requires a clear and unwavering vision for the company, a design DNA, delivered through consistently cohesive, exceptional experiences that can seamlessly transition anywhere at any time. So when Google rebranded last year, I think everyone thought, yeah, it's nice, fair enough. I don't think people understood why Google were doing it, because they were setting themselves up for all of this kind of perforation that's going to happen between the on and offline capability. So I liked it then. I love it even more now. Now I'm starting to see things like Home coming out. So to summarize, designing cohesive, exceptional experiences creates a brand that will help your business to flourish in the future. I know it's quite a dry slide to finish on, but I'd just like to say I think this really is an amazing time for everyone. You shouldn't be scared. It should be really exciting. And I think you have to stop thinking about traditional means and methods and really just start to kind of express what you want these companies to be. Because I think that's part of the beauty of being a brand designer, is that we really get to influence these companies on a major level. And it's really exciting. I've got, this won't sound like a lot to you, but I've made an Australian health insurer start doing like bring and buy swaps for people. It's got nothing to do with health insurance, but it's got everything to do with the brand that we created for them. And I think things like that for me are really exciting. It's way more than just a logo. That's everything. Thanks for your time.
So you stated that before you got to Interbrand, you were only really working on the fringe of branding. I thought that was really interesting. So my two-part question is this. What is the biggest difference between the work you were doing then and what you're doing now?
Yeah.
And what advice would you have for anyone that wants to get more deeply involved in the center?
Yeah. Well, I think the work I used to do was more, in a strange way, I used to be one of the kind of, because we were a small boutique agency, we were almost the minnows that followed in a big agency like Interbrand to kind of work through the organizational problems of a big business. But the actual DNA of that identity was already set. So what we'd end up doing is really kind of tactical projects, things that had a singular purpose that we could design towards. When you design for brands, you have to design in so many different directions at once. It's absolutely incredible. You know, you can't just approach things by, let's start with a logo. You actually have to start talking about, as Yo was saying earlier, like the personality. A lot of what we do is personality-driven and really trying to articulate how that organization needs to feel when you interact with it, way before you get to any kind of visual solution.
Thank you so much.
That's all right.
Thank you so much.